This week, we're heading to Gibraltar, the tiny British rock on the southern tip of Spain. It has something very, very unique about it. My mate Chris. No, we do have a special guest this week, one of my best mates, Chris, but Gibraltar's airport has a runway that has a road running through the middle of it. So we'll go and walk over that a few times, but also learn a bit about the history of this rock and why this runway is one of the most challenging in the world for pilots. Welcome to the UK. Yeah, Gibraltar. That's the rock. This is an actual runway. Kind of cool. What do they say? Don't stop on it. This is the runway bit now. It's kind of got a weird texture to it, to be honest. It's very grippy. Very long. It's a runway. Just gonna linger. Can't stop, they'll shoot us, but I guess you're just walking across the runway at the end of the day, aren't you? Oh, I think they're closing it. They were closing it for a BA flight that was about to land. I wanted to film this, so I dumped the bags with Chris and ran up the top of a car park to try and get a good view. We've got one last guy making the trek. Oh, they sweep it. Okay, so I think their runway is like cleared now. Oh, they're starting to move in some stuff over here too. Can't see a plane yet. Well, that was an absolute bloody cock up, wasn't it? I had to be down this end, not that end. I guess I thought the plane was coming from that direction. I didn't want to stand in front of this building, but this was probably the perfect view. The absolute perfect view would have come in like this, come in, and then I would have lost it about there, but we live, we learn, we'll try again tomorrow morning. That end. Oh, well, just actually check. Let's start with the obvious question here. Why is there a road cutting straight through the middle of the runway? Well, Gibraltar is a huge British rock on the southern tip of Spain, and it was an incredibly important naval base for the UK. It sits at the mouth of the Mediterranean. In the 1930s, they figured it would be militarily useful to have an airstrip here. Problem was, Gibraltar's a big rock. There wasn't a whole lot of usable land, so they built it on the skinny, controversial bit that connects the rock to Spain. It started as a very short runway, around 440 meters long, but over the next decade, they extended it out to 1,600 meters into the ocean, using rock blasted from the Rock of Gibraltar itself. They've built secret tunnels throughout the rock, hence they had a lot of spare rock to throw around. Rock. The issue here with the airstrip being in that skinny patch of land connecting Gibraltar to Spain was that it would block the existing road, and so they implemented this whole road through a runway solution. The military airport eventually started serving commercial passenger flights. Gibraltar and the surrounding southern Spanish region became a popular holiday location for Brits, and at certain times throughout history there have been up to 15 plane movements a day, each time requiring the road to be closed for 5 or 10 minutes. This caused lots and lots of traffic delays, and so finally, after 80 years of road closures, the Kingsway Tunnel was built under the eastern part of the runway, opening in March of 2023. Traffic jams due to planes are no longer a thing. They've still kept the famous runway crossing open, but just to pedestrian and bike traffic. It is quite a wild experience. The airport is practically on the border, and so if you're walking from Spain, you basically cross a border on foot, which is a pretty unique experience in and of itself, and then straight away you're walking across a runway. I would 10 out of 10 recommend visiting this place at least once in your life if you can. They've really excavated it, you can see. There are holes in it. £45,000 for a car stacker spot. Incredible. They are off. Where are they going? Which end of the runway you reckon? Right or left? Gonna go left, turn around. They're moving. Whoa.
That afternoon, evening, we decided to set off on a hike up this big British rock. But that leads us to our next question.
So we're standing on, I guess, English territory, aren't we? This isn't Spain, but Spain is just there. Why is this English territory? Why is it important? It's a good question, isn't it? Well, it's strategically crucial, that's why, as it sticks out into the Mediterranean and you can patrol a lot of traffic and do all of that sort of jazz if you control it. But how did England end up with it?
I don't know. It's your lucky day today. You're about to find out.
We need to go back to the 1700s. Obviously, there's a whole lot of Spanish history, but long story short, for around 200 years, this was wholly Spanish territory, part of Spain, up until 1700, when King Charles II, I think that's the right guy, let me check my notes. Yes. King Charles II died. So, okay. Dynasties. What are they called?
Quick disclaimer here. We're entering deep Simon doesn't know what he's talking about territory, but let me give it my best shot.
I'm not qualified.
Prior to the death of King Charles II, the Habsburgs and the Bourbons could be seen as the two great powers in Europe. I want to caveat this first by mentioning that the British and the Dutch were new naval commercial empires. They were on the rise. The Ottoman Empire at this point was huge, Russia was on the rise, and while the Habsburgs were politically split into the Austrian Habsburgs and the Spanish Habsburgs after the 1556 Great Abdication of Charles V. The Austrian Habsburgs ruled over much of the central and eastern parts of Europe, and at this point, the late 1600s, were experiencing a bit of a resurgence, gaining new land after the 1699 Treaty of Karlowitz. The Spanish Habsburgs ruled over Spain, but also the Spanish Empire, the first empire on which the sun never set. It included Mexico, Central America, Florida, the Philippines, and much of South America. It had peaked in the late 1500s and was well and truly on the decline by the time of King Charles II's death. The entire Habsburgs clan, both the Austrian and the Spanish, were associated with strict European tradition and were staunch defenders of counter-Reformation Catholicism. But now the Bourbons. The Bourbons ruled over France, and under King Louis XIV, they had become the strongest sole European nation. They had the largest standing army in Europe, 350,000 men, and had a strong government that represented modernization and reform. Okay, so we've got the modern, powerful Bourbons and the traditional but split Habsburgs. I think we're good to go.
So yes, up until the 1700s, King Charles II, he was the last Spanish king from the Habsburgs dynasty. But due to genetic health issues, probably from inbreeding within the Habsburgs, it came out after his death that he only had one testicle, and that testicle didn't work. He was infertile. He was unable to have any children, and this created some serious succession issues for Spain. At the time, the Spanish Empire was one of the biggest, one of the most powerful. So before his death, Charles II was struggling on who he should write into his will as his successor. There were two options. There was Philip of Anjou. He was a Bourbon from the Bourbon dynasty. He was a grandson of France's king at the time, Louis XIV. And then there was Archduke Charles, who was in Habsburg, and he was the son of an Austrian emperor. He was part of that clan, essentially. Basically, the way that it played out was Spain itself, King Charles II, and the French wanted him to obviously pick the Bourbon option, whereas pretty much the rest of Europe, and that was it really, pretty much the rest of Europe wanted him to pick the Habsburg option. I guess why did Spain support this option for the French Bourbons? Well, Spain wasn't doing well in the sort of late 16th, 17th century. The whole of Europe wasn't doing well, specifically due to just, they kept on having wars pretty much, and there was a mini iceberg going on. So generally, economically, the whole of Europe wasn't in a great way, but the Habsburgs were not running things very well in Spain specifically, especially when you've got a king, Charles II. He became king at 4 years old. He had a whole bunch of mental and health issues. So Spain wanted change. Anyway, long story short, this led to the War of Succession in Spain, or in Europe. Basically, France, Spain versus the rest of Europe, the Austrians, the Germans. England decided to back the Austrian, German, Habsburgs side of things. So yeah, in 1704, the British captured Gibraltar from Spain, and then when the Treaty of Utrecht, there you go, we've got ourselves a local here, was signed in 1713, essentially what happened was the Bourbons got control. Well, Philip was made king of Spain, but as part of the deal, they were never allowed to merge France and Spain, even though they had ancestral roots. And England got Gibraltar just in the deal. Obviously, it's a very strategic military asset for them. It's just a big rock, really, at the bottom of Spain. But it meant that they could sort of control a lot of the traffic through the Mediterranean and, yeah, build a big military base. Basically, that's war history. I don't know a whole bunch of history. I found it a bit interesting anyway. I guess here we go. Some of my notes. Britain gained Gibraltar. They also gained Minorca, not Majorca. Majorca's a big island. Minorca's a small island next to Majorca. Austria, Germany, I guess is the Austrian Empire at that point, received the Spanish territories in Europe, such as the Spanish Netherlands, which ended up being Belgium and Luxembourg, I think, and parts of Italy, because at the time, Spain, I guess, had ownership over the areas of Milan and Sicily, stuff like that. As part of the treaty, Britain retained Gibraltar permanently, although Spain continues to dispute this. They don't dispute the actual treaty itself, they just dispute what England has done and some of the land expansion that has occurred, I guess, more recently, not the 1700s. That might be Africa.
I think that's Africa.
Yeah, I've never been to Africa. Well, actually, no, I've been to Egypt, but never seen it from this side. But yeah, we'll get into a bit of the controversies around Gibraltar tomorrow morning, and then also go check out the airport. It's just over there. It's pretty cool. It's built on controversial land. And yeah, maybe just, I don't know, fly British Airways. Anyway, let's go. Bye. You're going to do it that hard? Once I've worked through the concussion. Good morning. Welcome back to Gibraltar. Let's talk about some of the controversial points about this place. What Spain isn't happy with, etc., etc. Spain generally, I don't think they like to, but they do recognize Gibraltar as English territory. You know, they signed a treaty, gave England forever rights over this rock. But there's three things that they're not exactly happy with. Firstly, it's this. The isthmus. The isthmus. The bit that connects the rock to mainland Spain. Essentially, under the treaty, and it's written in ways that aren't very clear. There wasn't a map in the treaty. But essentially, the wording was that England would get the fort and the rock. And the generally accepted border of that was this road right here. Devil's Tower Road, which just runs along here. That's where our hotel is. But in 1815, there was a yellow fever outbreak in Gibraltar. There wasn't enough space to build any sort of quarantine camps. And so England agreed with Spain to build quarantine camps on the isthmus, the bit of land. And then essentially they just never gave them back and slowly turned it into this. They end up building the airport there. There's a cemetery here. There's some sports fields down that end of the road. That's the main point of contention with Spain today. England's argument here is that, hey, we've just had the land forever now, so it's ours legally, which I mean is a pretty English argument if you ask me. But yeah, that is the main point of contention with Spain. The second point has to do with water rights. Spain argues that Gibraltar shouldn't have any sea rights. Gibraltar argues that they have 3 meters around the rock. They end up in arguments about fishing and stuff. And the final thing is the tax status of Gibraltar. It's a little bit of a tax haven for England or English citizens. There's no VAT, did you know that? But there's a local tax, I think is how it works. But there's no VAT, there's a low corporate tax rate, there's a low personal income tax rate here compared to most of the rest of Europe and England. So it's seen as a bit of a tax haven, especially when they were in the EU, which is another point that we'll get to in a second. It acted as a bit of a tax haven for EU citizens. So that's the controversies of this rock. Let's go see the airport. Let's go fly out of this thing. Let's talk a little bit about Brexit too, but I'll do that as voiceover because it's mostly just numbers.
Okay, it's not all numbers, and let's go a little bit further back than just Brexit. There have been 2 referendums in Gibraltarian history, with the first taking place in 1967. This was triggered by Spain's then dictator Francisco Franco, who wanted to regain control of the rock. This one simply asked whether Gibraltarians wanted to pass under Spanish sovereignty. They would all keep their British citizenships, but the rock would become Spanish territory. Out of the 12,200 137 votes, 12,138 voted to remain. Only 44 people voted for the Spanish option. There were more blank and invalid votes than there were pro-Spain votes. The second referendum took place in 2002, and this one was a bit more vague. It asked the question, do you approve of the principle that Britain and Spain should share sovereignty over Gibraltar? The vagueness of this question didn't matter in the end, with almost 99% of the votes going the way of no. It's safe to say that back then the Gibraltarians were incredibly patriotic people. And this may be a little bit different now though due to Brexit. Unlike other British overseas territories like Bermuda, the Falkland Islands, Turks and Caicos, which were never part of the European Union, Gibraltar was unique in that it was. Quick note here too, the UK and Gibraltar never took part in the Schengen zone or the EU's customs union. So that border was always in place, but a large part of Gibraltar's economy was made up of online gambling and offshore banking that served Europe. And this would all be lost if the UK left the EU's single market. It was also estimated that over half of Gibraltar's workforce, upwards of 15,000 people, lived in Spain but commuted to Gibraltar for work, further complicating the matter. And so when the day came to vote, Gibraltar delivered one of the most decisive results of the entire UK-wide referendum. An extraordinary 95.9% of votes cast were in favour of remaining in the EU. This represented the strongest pro-Remain vote of any of the 382 counting areas across the UK. The significance of this vote was amplified by an exceptionally high turnout of 83.64%, far exceeding the UK's average of 72.2%. When the day came to leave, Gibraltar was thrown into a rather perilous state of limbo. They were deliberately left out of the UK's trade and cooperation agreement that was signed with the EU at the end of 2020. This was done to allow Gibraltar the ability to negotiate a more bespoke treaty with the EU that would ensure the economic prosperity of Gibraltar and the surrounding Spanish region. Now, Chris and I were in Gibraltar in March. I bulk film a bunch of these videos and then edit them weekly. It's lucky I didn't make this video any earlier because on the 11th of June, 2025, the core aspects of an agreement were finally reached between Gibraltar and the EU. This new treaty will fundamentally change how the border between Gibraltar and Spain operates, creating a common travel area. This means they will have practical Schengen zone integration without actually joining the Schengen zone. How will this work? Well, if you enter Gibraltar via boat or plane, you will have to go through 2 customs checks. First, there will be a Gibraltarian customs agent, making sure you can legally enter the UK. And then you'll go through Spanish customs, and these agents will check to make sure that you can enter the Schengen zone. If either bar you from entering, you're out, deported. This means that, say, a UK citizen may be denied entry to Gibraltar if they do not meet the EU requirements, or if they've already used up all of their visa-free time in Europe. But this will enable frictionless trade between Gibraltar and Spain, allowing for the free movement of people and goods across the border. There are a few other things in there too, one being that whilst Gibraltar doesn't need to adopt the EU's VAT system, they will need to gradually up their local transaction tax to at least the level of the lowest standard VAT rate in Europe. But overall though, they've got a deal that seems to work for both sides.
So our flight today is at 3:10 p.m. It's 11 o'clock now. It's not looking great, the weather. Visibility's not incredible. And then I guess more pressure in. The British Airways flight this morning has been diverted to Malaga. We got this one coming in an hour or 50 minutes. We'll see if this one lands. This is the one that we got to care about. If this one takes off like normal, lands like normal, then we're all good. But hopefully we're not getting stranded here today. That's quite a nice part of the world to get stranded in, even when it rains. Do you think we'll make it out of here today?
Hopefully.
Hopefully? I reckon we got a shot. It's a notice.
What's a notice?
It's a notice. It's a fancy notice.
It looks like Ceto. I don't know why it sucks.
On a runway. Middle of a runway. Wow. That's wild. Oh, the dog took a dump on the runway. The dog literally took a dump.
What I think is your airport. Kill it.
That's a big one. That dog took a huge one. That EasyJet flight is diverting to Malaga now, so who knows if he'll get out of here today? We might be on a bus to Malaga. It's very windy. Not many airports you could get a electric scooter from either. Delayed.
It is torrential rain outside. The viewing terrace.
Oh yeah, cool.
Let's go check it out. Schindler's
Lift.
Lift, not list.
1,000 kilograms.
Kilos, 13 persons.
Don't invite your mum. Kidding, your mum's lovely and your mum's very slender and yes, I'm not going to say anything else. Tad windy? You're no expert, but you could land it.
Airways regrets to announce that flight BA 492 from London Heathrow has been diverted to Malaga Airport. Will now be operating out of Malaga Airport. Coaches will be arranged.
How did I get a coach to Malaga?
We just came from Malaga.
I just came to Malaga.
Came specifically for Gibraltar.
Ah, yeah. We've seen one plane land.
Half a plane.
Half a plane land and half a plane depart.
I guess fate loves irony here. We had literally caught the bus down to Gibraltar from Malaga the day before just to fly out of this airport, and now we're going straight back. So why the diversion? A bit of rain never stopped a plane, right? There's a combination of factors that lead to Gibraltar being a particularly tough airport to land at. Firstly, it's the length. Gibraltar's runway is just 1,777 meters long, with both ends leading into the ocean. For the A320s that fly here with EasyJet and British Airways, this is generally okay. There's of course many factors that go into this, and I'm probably not reading these charts correctly, but I believe that an A320 full of passengers requires a minimum runway length of about 1,500 meters. So this does not leave pilots with a whole lot of margin, especially if you have a wet runway, a tailwind, or any sort of floaty turbulence on approach. And well, that's the big factor here, the wind. Gibraltar has two main prevailing winds, an easterly one known as the Levante and a westerly known as the Poniente. Both of these can cause havoc as they flow around and over the rock, which is right there, only a few hundred meters away from the runway. Powerful eddies and downdrafts can cause aircraft to experience sudden gains or losses in airspeed and altitude, making for incredibly challenging approaches. The airport also isn't set up with an ILS, an instrument landing system, meaning pilots have to have the runway in sight on approach. Visibility plays a big part here as well. Basically, this airport is one of the more challenging in the world, and hence the diversion to Malaga here. In 2022, 3.8% of flights to Gibraltar were diverted. This isn't that high in reality, but significantly higher than the global average of about 0.33%.
That's not very eco-friendly.
We're about to take a bus to Malaga to catch a plane, okay? Do you know what is eco-friendly?
What?
Wine Tracker Plus.
Everybody, Wine Tracker Plus.
Goodbye, Gibraltar Airport.
Closing the airport.
They don't want us to see that it's sunny
Too much
outside.
sunshine.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Off we go. It's pretty epic. Really messes up the flights a bit, but
Sound like a ticket across the border.
a little white bag.
A white bag with a bit of powder in it.
Get them to smuggle it. Second you cross the border, they go, "We'll have that back, thank you." It's cocaine and illegal cigarettes in that bag, I reckon.
In a Walker's bag of chips.
How else do you think they're paying for the coach? Chips. Chippies. It's a little food for
humble digestive.
you. Whisper bar. Is that it?
A bottle of water.
Bottle of water.
Bottle of water.
Honestly, it's better than they give you on the plane, so it's impressive. This bus is going to be as long of a journey as the actual flight.
1 hour later.
From that point on, we had a pretty standard intra-Europe BA flight. We did get into the lounge in Malaga. It's nice. I love going to lounges with Chris because this is basically him every time there's a free buffet.
You can take a small bite the corner. You see? Just bite it.
Worth it?
Oh yeah. I'm gonna get another one.
You're gonna get a second? Sausage cam. Pa, 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 pa.
Otherwise, it was a standard BA, that should really stand for Budget Airways, flight, because the service is minimal. You do get the complimentary humble digestives, though, which, look, I might be in the minority here. I like them.
Time to sit on a train for an hour. Done a bus, done a plane. It's time for a train.
Please stand back from the platform.
Okay, that's about it. Make sure you go follow me on Instagram here. Go follow me on LinkedIn here. That one's semi-ironic, but it has been quite interesting to see what a lot of you guys do. So yeah, go check out flightformula.com. I will see you all in the next one. Bye.
Simon? Is that Simon?
What's Simon?
Like, subscribe, follow. I'm making commission off this as well.
0%. Got Paul Mescal here, walking up the hill in a pair of gazelles. Wow, Africa.